Hey, it's Sonia, and welcome to the Smarta Podcast. Hi, welcome back. I cannot wait to see how you've got on in your first month of 2025, how you are with your goals. It's so good to get back in here and set you back on track. I hope you've used the past 2 weeks because now we're going to dive deep into the world of business. In today's episode, I cannot wait to introduce you to Meggy and her 3-step process, think, reflect, build, that you're gonna hear over and over in today's episode on how you can turn startups into scale-ups with all of the wisdom that she's acquired over the past decades as she worked in recruitment. I just wanted to ask you a quick favor. If you know anyone from your friends to your family that is interested in entrepreneurship, if you could please share this podcast with them so they can learn what it takes to become a successful founder or just be an employee that people love. Here are the 3 qualities and routines that you will learn if you listen all the way until today's podcast. Number 1, adaptability. Number 2, building a good culture in the work environment. And lastly, number 3, intentional team building. Now let's find out more about who this Meggy Saylor is. Margareta, also known as Meggy Saylor, is originally from Vienna and it now resides in the UK. Meggy has been a pivotal force behind some of the world's fastest growing startups. Her career kicked off in 2006 when she helped lead BlackBerry through its hyper-growth across Europe. From 2010 to 2015, Meggy played a vital role in Tesla's expansion across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, growing the team from 30 employees to thousands during a time of unprecedented growth. Meggy's passion for scaling new tech companies didn't stop just there. More recently, Meggy served as the global head of recruitment at Lilium, helping scale the company from its early days, expanding the team from 30 to over 400. Her unique perspective on how to build scalable, sustainable businesses is highlighted in her new book, Culture Up. In Culture Up, Meggy and her co-authors dive deep into the key elements of success for startups, especially when it comes to their people and culture. Drawing from personal experience inside high-growth unicorns like Tesla and Lilium, as well as interviews with top investors, entrepreneurs, and professionals, Culture Up reveals the behind-the-scenes strategies that shaped these organizations into global giants. Hi, Meggy. Welcome to the Smarta Podcast. It's great to have you here. I cannot wait to sit down and chat with you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Sonia, for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. It's all good. I'm in the UK, as you know. So finally, we have a bit of sunshine. So it's great.
Oh, that is great, especially coming from the UK. It's lovely weather for a lovely podcast. All right.
Exactly.
Here's where I want to take you first. Let's pretend that you can talk directly to the listener.
Mm-hmm.
What are the 3 things they will learn if they take everything to heart about what you will share today?
A really good question. I hope that they will learn about how to get away into various companies. I hope they will learn about what it is that they need in order to succeed in business. And I also hope that they learn a little bit about me and my background and what it took for me to get to where I am today.
Mm-hmm. All right. I can't wait to discuss, especially about your success story and also everything basically in today's discussion will be about leading a startup and everything related to that side of the business.
Yeah.
So there's where I want to take you first to your career, which is very impressive and has spanned some of the most iconic and renowned startups from BlackBerry to Tesla to Lilium. So I want to talk a little bit more about the experiences that you had in these companies and how they shaped your understanding of what it takes to build such a successful team.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So first and foremost, I think there's a couple of things I'd say. I've been really lucky in my life to actually get my foot into the door. So I really think that sometimes in life, opportunities they present themselves, don't they? And it's up to us if we take them or not. So I've been really lucky to be given these opportunities. And then it took an awful lot of myself to actually go for these opportunities, even though, I might have had imposter syndrome at the time or not, but I took them and I gave my almost best and I worked really hard to make it happen, to get to where I am today. Um, there's an awful lot that I've learned over the years. And in fact, I've never stopped learning. Every company that I've ever went into, I almost felt like school. It's really funny. When I used to start working at BlackBerry, I would always say to my friends and to my colleagues, oh, I feel like at the moment I'm sort of in high school and I don't know what's going to come later, but it's the craziest company I've ever worked for. But the reality is the companies I worked for later, like Tesla, for example, or even Lilium, I'd say they were a lot crazier in a good way. But generally, what I've learned, to sum it up, probably quite precise, is that it takes a really great team effort, and an awful lot of hard work to make these type of companies really successful. So it's definitely a team effort. It's always about the culture that the company has, and it's really about finding the right people at the right time for these companies, because no company ever stays the same. And the culture changes as a company grows as well. So it's really important to get the right people in at the right time. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, getting the right people at the right time with all of these culture changes is easily
Mhm.
affected by the environment, by different social norms
Yep.
get implemented. I want to take you back to something that you said, in which when you were first working at BlackBerry, you said it was the craziest company you worked for. And then when you ended up working also at Tesla and Lilium, you said those were also crazy, more
Yes.
crazy companies. Why do you label them like this? What made it such a, let's say, fascinating or particular work experience for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think because I've worked for large corporate companies like HP, for example, or big software companies like VMware at the time, I had the chance to actually see what it's like to work in companies that are set up. They have been there for years and years to come, with thousands of employees versus going into companies that are scaling and building. And when I talk about crazy, I actually mean the speed that they're going at and the amount of work that you do and the things that you can learn in such a short time if you open for it. Um, and the pressure actually that you get to an extent from growing fast. This is why I label them as crazy. I must admit, I've never learned as much as working for companies like BlackBerry, Tesla, Lilium, or even now working with my startup at Mondo Squares, because I work with a lot of different, not just startups, also scale up, small, medium businesses, and generally growing companies. I like the excitement of it. I think you really have to be the type of person to work in growing companies. Not everybody likes it. It really takes a certain company and a certain mindset to work in a growing company. So I label them as crazy because to me it's fun, it's good, it's challenging, very hard as well. Let's be honest about this. But this is why I personally label them as crazy. But most people who work in these companies will probably say the same.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it definitely is a lot of adaptability that you
Yeah,
gotta be up for. I mean, if you're not ready to change, let's say, your routines, I don't know how often it is, probably monthly or even weekly, I
yeah.
assume, then maybe in some ways it can be very challenging. And I want to talk more about advice, and I'm seeking
Mhm,
yours in particular for me. So
mhm.
I'm a secondary high school student right now,
Yeah,
in my second to last year.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you precisely about mastering my strengths and benefiting myself to, let's say, potentially work in a very high status or corporate environment later on.
Mhm.
What advice would you give me in terms of how early I should start as now, as I'm in high school, to build skills, to master my skills in terms of getting to work with great teams?
Yeah. Hmm. Let me think about this a little bit. I think there's a couple of things that will always be good for you in life, as they're always good when you work in companies. And one of the things is the ability to adapt, because things change all the time, don't they? They do in life, but also they do in business. And so adaptability is actually one of the biggest strengths that you need to, or that you can and should probably try and hone in, especially in the times and days that we live in right now. Adaptability and changing on the spot is quite important, and not seeing it as a negative thing. So I think that's one really cool skill. That you can also in your day-to-day life and in high school, or even if you would be at university or any other place now that you could practice. I think that's one really major core part. And it also goes for me hand in hand with resilience. So adaptability and resilience are fundamentally not necessarily exactly the same things, but the resilience will help you thrive. So you adapt to certain situations, but it's your resilience and your determination that will get you further. That's the resilience that will not make you give up. The resilience is this core fundamental element that will make you push harder, go further, and not retreat when you actually feel like that's exactly what you want to do. So these are the things I think anyone, and especially now, being young and eager and keen, if you can develop that and hone that in, that is a brilliant life skill to have and a brilliant skill for school and for work.
Hmm. I want to go deeper in this because I'm really captivated by the answer that you just gave. And you said that adaptability is the best habit or the best, let's say, skill that you can hone, as you said.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, what's your favorite routine or habit to build resilience, to keep being consistent towards working to your goals, or let's say the company's deadlines if you have something really big coming up in such a short amount of time?
Yeah. I think that can look different for everyone. Um, but I will probably say that for myself. So I think there's a couple of things on how I personally have built resilience, if we start with that. So I think one big part of what made me a resilient individual, resilient girl, woman that I'm now, is that I've always had very strong females in my family and strong in mentally strong and kind-hearted, soft-hearted. I was very lucky with a good sense of humor. And just watching them, going through life with all the great positives, highs that life brings, but also setback and blows. Are the things that I think made me more naturally resilient is because I've witnessed it. Same goes for the men in my family, of course. Was also really lucky to have them in my life. But I think because the females, because I am a female, I would watch them. So this is how I build resilience because my mom, for example, I'm just giving you an example. If I would have fallen off my bike when I was young, my mom would pick me up, look at me and say, "You okay? You fine? Can you, is anything hanging off?
Hmm.
Um, can you still walk? Has anything happened? No? Okay, get back onto your bike and go." The other way of how I managed to build resilience throughout my life is actually, and this sounds maybe a bit strange, but you understand while I go into it. I started riding horses when I was very young, so I was 8 years old. Pretty tiny thing I was, and I always ended up on the biggest horses, but the most amazing ones. Very sweet they were. But I think that also helped me with resilience and being flexible and leadership actually to an extent. So I learned how to work with a horse in situation where the horse get scared or it might be dangerous. You have to be calm, you have to show leadership. And when something goes wrong, you have to improvise and move on. And again, if I would have fallen off, people would have told me to get back up. So I'm not saying everybody needs to start riding, but what I'm trying to say is when you get knocked down, keep getting up. And even if it means you take one step, because sometimes it's really hard. I think it depends on what happens to you in life, and it's also okay. One thing that I've learned over time, it's also okay to just take a little bit of time out if you really feel beaten down by the world or you really can't, um, you know, deal with what's going on. It's always good to take a little time out, talk to nice people around you that they make you feel safe and heard and okay, and then pick up and go along and just put one foot forward at a time. And it could be as little as you're applying for a lot of jobs, you don't get any answers. Okay, it doesn't matter. You try a different method. you look at a different job board, you contact somebody. So as long as you keep moving forward, I think this is how resilience helps you. And for me, it started when I was little. And what you can do to build your resilience in that sense is very similar. It's always about that getting up and going out and trying new things, trying new hobbies, and sticking to them. I'm not saying you have to do things forever, but try new things, go for it, do it for six to 12 months. And even when it gets hard, push and you'll get through it and then go off and do something else. So this is one way. There's plenty of ways of building resilience, but this is what I think helped me um, and still keeps me going every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For the ones listening that can't see, you have a book there in
Yes.
the background, which is Culture Up, which is your book.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that now.
Yeah.
So, in this work, you focus on the importance of culture in startups
Mhm.
specifically. I wanted to ask you, Meggy, in particular, why is culture so critical to the success of a startup, in your opinion?
Yeah, really, really good question, Sonia. So, my business partner, Mareike Mutzberg, and I, maybe just to give you a quick backstory for the book, we actually met at Lilium. So, we were some of the very earliest employees at Lilium. So, this is how we met each other. And I, of course, had worked in startups before, and Mareike had worked in scaling companies, fast scaling companies, and global companies. So when we worked together at Lilium, we did an awful lot of work around company culture, and we actually saw how much difference it makes if you form a culture where people feel accepted, when people feel heard, where people feel like they could thrive, and you have sort of minimal processes, minimal systems. Um, we also tried and when we succeeded to build a culture where people would get together from all different parts of the world, and it was a very celebratory culture, and it actually helped us to get further quicker. And on top of that, our employees were happy, which was the goal. To have a really high performing workforce, but also people have fun and they'll be happy, along the way. And we managed to build that. And this is actually why we then decided to write Culture Up, because having worked in other companies before, we also know that other cultures can destroy companies. And I see it daily as I'm working now with different startup scale ups and small, medium businesses. It is quite important the type of culture you create, and then also try and find people that add to that culture. So I give you a prime example. When we worked at Tesla, we were very honest with people. We actually said to them, look, this is going to be really hard and you're going to work an awful lot. And we're not trying to scare you because we really didn't. But people had to understand that working at Tesla wasn't going to have a picnic. It was not a 9 to 5 job. It was a job where you build something that didn't exist. That was something, obviously the electric car has been around for quite a while, but not at that scale and not in the way that Elon Musk at the time, years ago, wanted to build the company and the ideas that he had years ago on what Tesla should look like. So the culture makes or breaks your environment, your work environment, and it naturally selects people in and out. So this is why it was so important for us to write the book, and why company culture is quite a critical thing to think of, and it's something that you can form on purpose. Company culture forms naturally. Um, the minute you get more people into a company from various places, a culture forms. But you can decide as a founder, as somebody who owns the company, as a leadership team, what you want this culture to be like and how it needs to change at some point. So that's why we actually wrote the book in the end, and just to be helpful, really, be helpful to new founders and maybe have a little less headaches and maybe get some tips and tricks from people who've done it a few times. That's why culture is important, and that's why the book came about.
Hmm. Really off the top of your head here, what's your favorite practice or information or let's say skill that you have in Culture Up that you think is valuable for anyone that's in a business currently?
Right.
I put you on the spotlight here.
No, no, no. I like the question. I think I just want to think about this a little bit because the book
Hmm.
was written in a format that is more like a coaching conversation. So, in
Hmm.
essence, it can be very helpful to people to sit and reflect. So I think one of the skills that this book allows you to is actually to sit and reflect about company culture. It allows you to sit and reflect about how does my recruitment process work, or how do I communicate with my team. So I think that is not I think. So this is specifically how the book was written, because there's so many amazing books about company culture and everything like that. But this book specifically was written as if you would have a coach, um, and you have questions in there to ask yourself. So it's that reflective nature that is always good to have, because it's very easy at work and in life to just keep going, and everything happens to you, and you just do more of it or less of it. Then you start getting problems. You're not entirely sure, but you do the same thing. So actually sitting and reflecting changes the course of how you do things in life or at work. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'd
And
say that's it.
I think if you really scale it down from the executive world, this can instantly also be applied just as equally to high school students or university students that are just
Mhm.
starting out or getting in the world of business,
Yeah.
especially in terms of if you are employed to such a fast-paced growing company where,
Mhm.
you know, the goals might change weekly, to sit and reflect on what the goals are, on what
Yeah.
am I doing, on if I'm doing this right. So I want to scale it up now
Mhm.
to the founders, and
Yeah.
particularly in how they can build a positive and lasting culture from the very beginning.
Yeah. So every founder that I work with or have worked with in the past, not saying that every founder necessarily liked my advice, but it's a very honest advice to every founder that I have. The culture starts with themselves, and the founders themselves or any leader in that company will either make or break that culture. And what do I mean by that? So if I have a culture where I say, oh, we value people's opinion and we want you to come and talk to us if you have a great idea. And that's just one part of my culture, right? And a habit that I want to build in my company. And then if I, as a leader or founder, don't make time for my employees, if they come and knock on my door or they step by at my desk in an open plan office, or somebody writes me a quick email because they've noticed something they're not sure about, and if I as a leader dismiss it, or I don't take the time to listen, or I somebody has a valid point and I don't act on it, that is something that needs to. So this is really what makes or breaks it. It's you as a leader, it's you as a founder that makes or breaks the culture. Is it simple like as that? Um, but it's a lot of pressure equally for some people. And but it's like families, you know. Think about your parents with children, right? So if you think about your parents, the way your parents live and the things that they show you, most likely in the environment that you will grow up in, you will, you know, either thrive in it, depending on what your parents do or how they behave and how they act, or it goes the other way, right? So
Mhm.
it's kind of like that, really.
So I want to move you now from, let's say, I'm going to put it as the life lessons that you've learned observing this environment
Yeah.
to your experience in this place.
Hmm.
So you've led recruitment at companies that grew small teams to
Hmm.
thousands of employees. So just
Yeah.
like you said, they weren't around for a long time, especially
Yeah.
this new field of electric cars while you were
Hmm.
working at Tesla. What are some of the biggest challenges in scaling a team during such rapid growth?
There are multiple challenges actually. So I remember in every single company that not every single company, companies like BlackBerry, Tesla, or Lilium at the time, they were all not known very well, right? So I needed to find a team together with the founders, or the company owners or the leadership team that would help us the take out into the world the culture, the vision, the mission of the company, and help us to get people excited about what we're doing or interested in what we're doing. And that takes a certain type of person, and they are really not easy to find. And obviously, you have to do it with speed. So I think from scaling companies like that, I really learned that at the beginning, It's a very specific type of person that you need to hire in order to build the fundamentals. Because when you have a
Mhm.
startup, you need to build the fundamentals, right? And I always say, and Mareike does as well, your first 100, 150 people are your cultural co-founders. That's what we call them, because we really believe that that is a critical mass of people. If you hire them right, they will take your culture out into the world, but also out into your company because they intrinsically believe in the company, in the vision, the product, the vision, the service, whatever it is. So it's really hard to find these people, right? And I've really learned that quite often good people know good people. So it goes for recommendations, or
Mhm.
sometimes you look for very specific people. So that's the first challenge. So you have to get through the first few years, to find these crazy builders, the dreamers and believers,
Mhm.
and get to them. And then as the company grows, you need to find people who can take things and make them smarter, faster, quicker. It's not necessarily always the people who started at the beginning. Some of them will grow with the company, but some of them don't like it and they will leave once the company gets to a certain size or a certain um, um, setup of the company in terms of structures and things like that. So I think what I've also learned is being adaptable and having speed. So really understand where the company is going and always look ahead. Always think about what does the company need for the next 2, 3 years. Typically, these companies don't think any further than that, and they can't quite often, depending on the environment they're in. But it's really also thinking about what do we need today, but also what do they need in a year's time? Because some startups make errors by hiring people literally for the need that they have. It's like, you know, I have an open cut and I need to put a plaster on it. It's like, oh, I need something here. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, but think, reflect for a second. Okay, you want to hire somebody who can do this job, but actually you want them to be in your company for 2 or 3 years. So think, reflect, build. So these are the challenges. It's challenges at all the different times, but yeah, I love it. Good. Keeps you busy,
Mhm.
keeps your mind
Definitely.
active. Does it answer your question?
It does. It does. Especially the part about the first 100, 150 people that you
Hmm.
hire are going to be the cultural, let's say, mark, the people that
Yep.
will make or break potentially
Yes.
your value as that company.
Yep.
And I want to take you now from the point of view of the possibly the listener listening right now that's younger, that's
Hmm.
let's say just about to go to university, that
Hmm.
possibly lacks job experience.
Yeah.
And my question to you is, what can teenagers do to be attractive to companies?
Yeah. It's a really important question, to be honest, because I think there's an awful lot that is being asked of young people these days. Um, and the job market has changed an awful lot and will continue to change with AI, as it has changed in the past, for various decades that we've had, with industrial revolution and things like that. So it's not new to the world that we have changes, but this time is with AI and it's quicker. So there's a couple of things you can do when you are in school, before you go to university. So I think one of the things is don't underestimate how great you are as an individual. And what I mean by that is all of us have natural tendencies to do certain things really well and other things that aren't so natural to us. So if I'm not good at maths, well, I'm not going to become an accountant or a physician, or I'm not going to become an engineer. That's basically because maths, and it was in my case, maths is something that just doesn't come natural to me.
Me
But
neither.
but I noticed that I was always good with people. Even when I was young, I could connect with people. People used to trust me. And yeah, I needed time to reflect on that, right? I didn't know that when I was 16. People used to tell me that, my parents, my parents' friends, they would always say, oh, it's so nice to talk to you and all of that stuff. So, and you have to listen. So I think try and figure out what is it that you like and enjoy, and what is it that you have a natural tendency to be good at, because that will help you later also in life or when you make applications to figure out what job might suit me better. Am I more social? Am I more the carer? So could I go into a caring job for somebody, or am I really great with numbers? Or do I love, would I want to go into space? What sort of jobs are there? So think about that. And the other thing is also don't underestimate what you do on a daily basis. I do work with younger people quite often and help them to get their CVs out. My niece is now 18, my nephew is 16, so I've helped them get ready for the interviews and go out and think about what companies they want to apply for and what they might want to do. And it's really hard. When I was 16, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had to try an awful lot of jobs to figure out what I'm good at. And that's okay. Not everybody knows from the
Mm-hmm.
beginning what they want to be. But keep reflecting on what are you good at? What can you do? And for example, if you're the type of person who likes to throw parties, great, then you can use that because actually, if you're the one who organizes the parties, it might seem like nothing because you're doing it, but actually, it's a lot more than probably your friends do. Or if you're the type of person who absolutely loves researching films into the detail and trying to figure out what the backstories are of some films, the reality is you are doing this and the majority of the people are not. So try and figure out, even though it seems so natural to you, try and figure out what is it that you have as a core skill that others don't. Or maybe you're really good at sports. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe, I don't know what it is, but try and reflect a bit. Or maybe in your case, ask your parents, ask your friends what they see that you are good at. It's okay to ask people to say, look, what do you think? What can I do really well? Or what am I like as a friend? Am I loyal? So try and figure out really in a safe space with the right people what it is that you can do well. And then when you are going to apply for jobs, if you, for example, had the chance to already, help your parents with something, or like I said, organize these parties or research certain things, then you have already something you can talk about, which is a lot more than most people do when they go. And it's something you can put on your CV. Or if you are doing a sport or you're caring for a family member or anything. So if I would be coaching you, I would be asking you questions now along Sonia. What is it that you do in your free time? And what is it that you love? And all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes a conversation to figure it out and reflect back a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's this really amazing quote that sums up what you just said. What might be, it goes along the lines of this. What's ordinary for you is extraordinary for others.
Completely.
And I think it's completely true. And that takes me on to the team, let's say, fluidity or connection. So as teams expand, it can get really challenging for communication to still go at the same pace that's very ideal for getting your goals achieved. And especially with all the stuff that you were telling me about earlier, about how working at these companies like Tesla can just be very, in a sense, overwhelming since it's very adaptable and the goals keep changing.
Mhm.
What strategies would you recommend for maintaining clear and effective communication in fast scaling startups?
Yeah, so what I've seen and or what I've seen together with my business partner Mareike or other people is that communication is a really hard thing, and it constantly has to adapt. But the easiest thing you can do as a company founder is to be very clear and open when you communicate. So some companies actually will set up weekly calls with the whole team, where the whole team gets together, and the team might share what they're currently working on, and the founder or any leader that is on top of the company actually should be going out and talking about what the priorities are, for example, because the leaders know exactly are they currently trying to raise money, either from external investors or are they trying to get money from a bank or I don't know what it is, but they will be able to or should be able to articulate very clearly what the priorities are so that people within the company can then sort of match their daily priorities, which can be very hard, to really figure out, okay, what do we need to do first? So the quickest form of communication is to have regular meetings. And I've seen this in small companies and I've set it up, or I've been part of being in that setup, that these weekly calls can really work. As the company grows, they get bi-weekly, then they start once a month. But it makes a massive difference if a owner, a CEO, a leader, actually sits and talks about what's going on for the company. What has the company done really well? What achievements have you had as a company? Or if there's something really tricky coming up, what is it? Being honest, letting people ask questions. So with communication, like I said, a tricky one. There is no right or wrong way. But being honest, approachable, and making sure that they put time in and being quite specific in what needs to happen, that always works.
Hmm. I talked to you about earlier how teenagers can be more attractive to companies, and now I want
Hmm.
to scale it back down again.
Hmm.
This time asking you how to build a little context here, how leadership is not taught in school per se.
Yeah.
So, what would you suggest in order to start building this awareness on the topic and to be prepared for the leading teams
Yeah.
when people are young?
Yeah, it's your social skills that I think are most important. Um, if you understand that people want to feel heard, and seen and accepted and safe, that's a really good way as a teenager to already start building your leadership skills. It's really fundamentally understanding how humans work and what their core needs are, um, and really sort of working with that, rather than jump into conclusions, which is something that we do really easily, right? And as a leader, depending on the type of leader you want to be, it's really important to remain a balance, to try and understand what's going on before you make a rash decision. But that depends on the type of leader you want to be. So I think that's a really good way of honing in your leadership skills. Another way would be, like I said to you before, either maybe joining a club or joining a team where you can potentially test out your leadership style, and have the opportunity. And some schools actually, quite often in schools, you have, I don't know what it's like for you, but quite often you will get put onto assignments where you have to get together in a group of people.
Yeah.
And together as a group of people, we have to do something. And this is also a good way of learning how to build leadership skills and persuade people, to help them get to a certain way. So it's not about shying away from these opportunities in school, because actually, when you're in school, they might seem boring, they might seem inconvenient, they might seem scary, but it's actually not shying away, because that's the time where you can learn.
Hmm.
So actually really trying to do that, or like I said, when you're with a group of friends, maybe you can organize something, then the next week, or the next month, another part of your friendship groups organize something. Um, and then, yeah, I think these are sort of some of the fundamentals way of doing it, because it's hard at this time to actually go and get some work experience. So,
You've told me that you were very sociable when you were, let's say, my age, but
mhm.
I can tell you for sure that though I might seem like a very outgoing or sociable person, I can say I definitely prefer being on my own and
Yeah,
just solitude in general.
yeah,
And you said the most important thing teenagers can do to build this skill of
hmm,
being a leader is
yeah,
to master their social skills.
hmm,
And so I think the easiest way to put an input of my own here
hmm,
is just to take every opportunity and being bold. I think is
hmm,
the easiest thing. For instance, reaching out to you.
hmm,
If I would have, let's say, hesitated or thought twice, I
hmm,
might have not sent that email, might have not
yeah,
sent that text. But if you just believe in your worth or know your value or know where you want to get and your goals and you stick to it and you know
hmm,
what the character of who you want to be, your
yeah,
ideal figure is, and you stick to it, I think it's very easy to just stop hesitating and being bold.
yeah. May I just interrupt you there for a second?
Sure, go for it.
Because you mentioned something, and it's an interesting one, because you mentioned that you are more introverted than extroverted. You like spending time on your own.
Mhm.
Well, actually, I'm exactly like you, and I've always been
I see.
exactly like you. Yeah. It takes me an awful lot of energy if I'm in a room with a lot of people. It takes me
Hmm.
an awful lot of energy of constantly being present, talking to people. This is why I like spending time with my greyhounds, going out for a walk in nature, having a horse around, riding, because I
Hmm.
need the time to be to myself and not talk. and either sit at home or read a book or being out with the dogs and the animals in nature to regroup and get my energy back because I am naturally an introvert. But I taught myself to be an extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
And why did I do that? Because I learned the hard way. I wasn't brilliant at school. I'm going to be really honest with you. I was okay. I wasn't brilliant at school, but I actually learned that if you don't speak up, you get overlooked. And I realized it even more in a work environment. Now, I'm born in the 80s, right? So, in the early 80s. So, work environments have changed by now, but it really does depend on who your manager is. So, I had plenty of managers that I would classify as old school managers, where you really had to speak up and you really had to show and you really had to say stuff, even if you're scared to your core, which I always was when I was young, because I've always had imposter syndrome and I still have it. But just like you just said, that I'll just go and do it. Because the upshot for me is, although it's hard to go and try something new, it's only hard for a certain amount of time or for a second. And what comes after, it's way more rewarding than sitting in this zone where I'm scared and nothing happens. I'm not going back or forth. I'm just sitting in my nice, comfortable, scared zone. Sometimes not even scared, sometimes it's comfortable, but typically not much movement happens. And so I can push out and try. And okay, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If I fail, I learn. But it's the upside of the other side, like you just said. You reach out, you try and get to people. Is what you get on the other way. That's what I don't want to miss in life. I want to have the opportunities because I think later in life we will regret the opportunities we haven't taken. If we take an opportunity and we fail, yeah, you might regret it, but you probably don't regret it as much as you have never reached out to somebody or you've never taken that step to, I don't know, go on the holiday on your own and have the holiday of life. I don't know, but it's literally
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying. It's that pushing yourself, even when you're scared to your core, and even if your voice is shaking when you speak up, do it because
Mm-hmm.
you're just going to learn.
Plus, every, let's say, categorized or labeled failure that you might think you did is actually, in my opinion, a ripple effect that can undoubtedly bring you that many more opportunities come your
Yep.
way, which can
Mm.
then, force you to try new things and
Yep.
evolve as a person. And through here, I want to take you to recruiting and retaining top
Hmm.
talent,
Yep.
which I assume can be challenging for any company,
Yep.
especially in this growing age where you've got that many more applicants for the same job.
Hmm.
What advice would you give to startups trying to compete for the best talent in today's market?
Yeah. Various things you can do. Quite often, startups have problems where they don't have the money that big companies offer, right? But again, it goes to finding the right people at the right time. So when I'm in a very early stage of my startup, I will be looking for people who are looking for course. So it could be either a course if in terms of what your company has to offer. So what does this company stand for? What does it do for the world? It doesn't do for the world. So I will probably naturally go and sell that more as a founder when I'm trying to get people excited and then make them stay and grow with me. So I would go out as a founder and really tell them if it speaks to that person, it's all about what can my company do, but what can it do for you so you can get your growth opportunity. Yeah, okay, we're not paying the big bucks like really large organizations do, but the experience that you get here, that's what I can give you. So I think it's about being honest. So understanding your company, understanding your market, understanding how long it takes, and being honest to your candidates at the time, but then also your employees about what they can do and give them the freedom and responsibility of doing it. And as the company grows, quite often the needs of people can get a little bit more different to these early individuals in the company. So some of them will need more financial stability, and there will come a time where you have that. And you can offer that, for example, or you can offer certain benefits as a company. But generally, what I've really learned in time is most people want to do something that they enjoy. So I think as long as you can offer that and keep giving that, that is your option to retain. And as the company grows, like I said, there's different things and different needs that people need. So if you're quite diverse and you hire a diverse group of people, you just figure out do we need, I don't know, maternity leave, for example, which you sometimes as a startup not necessarily think about. because that's the last thing anyone thinks about. Maybe I'm not saying that they don't, depending on the company and service they have. Um, but you also understand a really good cover for maternity leave later could be very important, for example, for your employees. That's just something on the top of your head. But it's about being honest, and not overselling and not telling people something that they can't get. Because I've been in interviews and I've left companies where people would tell me everything, how brilliant the company is and what I could do. And when I got there, I couldn't do any of it. And the company wasn't at all like they described it. And I personally left these companies after 1 to 3 months because I thought it's not what I signed up for. It's not what I want. And no, I'm not doing it. So it went against my core values and I left these companies. So it's being honest, I think helps, and try and figure out what your candidate wants. So what's important to the candidate? If it's only money, great. They can come in 12 months, in 18 months. We've also, when I've worked with startup, we have also specifically hired for that. So for example, if I would go out at the beginning of Lilium or Tesla and we found some really great talent, but they said, look, at the moment, it's a little bit too unstable. I have young children at home that I need to feed. I love this company. I love the idea. I could do some great things, but I can't go and halve my salary just so I can work with you. Fine, great. As a recruiter, as a great leader, you keep these people in your mind on file. You connect on LinkedIn, and 16 or 18 months down the line, you go back to them because you might have more stability. You reach out, you get them in. So that's how I've worked quite often with my teams in order to get people excited and then keep the companies growing and keep them retained, which can be very hard. And it doesn't always work either. So, it's not like I know exactly, I have the magical solution to it, because I think nobody does, even though they try to tell you that, but it's not true.
Hmm. And obviously, I think of these, let's say, values of sticking true to the core values of the company and being true to yourself and listening to to the person candidating can transfer over to the interviews, especially from paper to in real life.
Mhm.
And this is actually one of the unique aspects in Culture Up, where the interviews that you conducted with the other industry leaders
Yep.
were very important. So I want to ask you now some of the most surprising or insightful things that you learned from these about scaling the startups and building especially strong teams. Since
Mhm.
we talked a lot about the technical side, now giving into more of examples or personal stories that you have to share.
Mhm. So when I interviewed all these industry leaders, it was really interesting going back to talking about imposter syndrome, right? So I had been in recruitment, or I've been in HR now for the last 20 years. I worked for very scaling companies, large organizations. Um, but I still felt every day like I didn't know what I was doing half of the time, to be really honest with you. And because I was always learning, and this is a good thing. I realized that later. I didn't do that at the beginning of my career, but I realized later if I'm always learning, that's a really good thing because nobody is ever the made done deal. Because once you stop learning, actually, this is not a great thing. And I actually realized from all the interviews that I've had in the book together with Mareike, is that actually I'm on the right path. When I wrote the book, I wrote it on purpose. I wanted to help people and founders out there and listen to certain things, of course, that I had to share. But when I interviewed all of these industry leaders, they actually shared the same message. And not because I asked them to, because actually that's what was going on at the time in the world and still applies because it's written in a way that you can always go back to it. So from a personal note, I'd actually learned that my imposter syndrome um, was really out there for me writing this book. And actually, there was no need for it because every industry leader had exactly the same thoughts as I did. So I knew I was on the right path. I just didn't really think I was, fun as it sounds. I'm not quite sure if that actually answers your question, but I mean, we could talk about what they said in specific or what was there if you wanted to go into that. I'm just talking more about my personal experience with
Hmm.
doing that.
It does answer my question. And so, just to sum up and put a close to the culture up and all that you learned in this industry,
Mhm.
listeners can immediately start applying the things that you've already said, but off of the top of your head, what's one routine that you do over and over again that you learned throughout these years that you, let's say, include in culture that you can tell the listener to go away and wake up tomorrow and put it in their routine?
Mhm. For me personally, is this not giving up um, and going out and trialing things and failing. So I do it subconsciously, but also quite often consciously, because like you said, for example, reaching out to people, I do the same. I always try and reach higher and higher, and I will try and go to people that are really impressive, and it scares me to actually even go up and speak to them, but I'll do it anyway, right? So it's that continuous, I think that's really my advice to the readers is continuously going out and just keep trying things and keep going. So, and I'd say that that has become a routine, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or make it a routine is this, don't let your imposter syndrome get the best of you. Just do it anyway.
Now, since we just finished off the topic with a book, I have a similar one that's on the same literature topic. That's one of my favorite questions to ask you as we wrap up the discussion for today.
Yep.
And it's what are your two favorite books that you would label as completely transformed the way you think in your life?
Yeah. So there's definitely Worthy from Jamie Kern-Lima that we discussed actually at
Hmm.
the beginning of the podcast. It's all about learning about yourself, believing in yourself, believing in your self-worth. There's a second book that I absolutely love and always go back to, and I can't remember for my life the name of it. I'll go and look at it in a second. It's about NASA, funnily enough. And this book is about there was a time when NASA had real issues internally, and they had problems with the mission. People actually died on missions because NASA wasn't communicating internally properly, and that actually led to people dying. And I need to go and find the book. What's it called? Ah, Mission Management. The book is called Mission Management, and it's from Paul Sean Hill. Mission Control Management from Paul Sean Hill. I haven't read it in a while, I must admit. I read it probably about 10 years ago and then 5 years ago. But I absolutely love that book. It seems completely strange for me to read the book. Not that I'm not interested in space and things like that and technology. But it didn't seem a natural fit for me at the time. But I thought, you know what? I want to learn about leadership. I want to learn about management. I want to know what's went wrong. And it's basically went all down to communication and how the company was run internally and things like that. So yeah, these are my two books that I love the most.
Hmm. Worthy by Jamie Lima and NASA Mission Management. I mean,
Yeah.
related to NASA Mission Management
Yep.
by Paul Sanhill.
I
Paul.
will send them Paul Sean Hill.
Paul Sean.
Paul Sean Hill. And the book is called Mission Control Management.
Now I got it. Meggy, we have this tradition on the Smarter podcast where I ask the previous guest to leave a question for my next one.
Okay.
And my last guest, Kevin Gaskell, is proposing you to answer this question. What advice would you give to someone struggling to believe in their own potential?
Hmm.
We talked a lot about beating the
Mhm.
inner
Yeah. So
imposter syndrome.
I know it's really hard because I've been there, when you don't believe in your own potential, and you have days where it's easier and you have days where it's harder. But I would definitely say is keep going back and keep reflecting over what you have done. Um, and really look at how far you have come. And in life, there's so many things that happen to us, good and bad. I'm not just talking about things that happen to you at work. I talk about things in life, in school, and actually realize that you're still here. So I think if you think about your self-worth, is look how far you come and look up and look at yourself and figure out that you're still standing. You're standing like an olive tree that is blowing in the wind, with the branches going back and forth, but you're fundamentally still here. So, if you really struggle with your self-worth, remind yourself of how strong you are. Remind yourself of what it took for you to get through everything in life, to come and get to the stage where you are today. And you have made that. Of course, circumstances, maybe people have helped you along the way, but you are still here. And you keep going further and you keep growing and you grow new branches and you grow new leaves. It's like a tree. Sometimes you go and hibernate over winter, and then spring comes and summer comes, and um your leaves come back out. So I think this is when you struggle with your self-worth, always remember where you come from,
Mm-hmm.
look at where you are, and then fundamentally trust that you can go further.
Definitely. I love that advice, especially since, as you said, as not only a company, but the employee that's stuck to this adaptability and always changing system, it can get very easy to get caught up in the hassle of today's world. And if you just pause to reflect and look at all you've come, you can have this moment of realization that can really set you apart to realize how far you've come, as
Yeah.
you were saying. So I started with you talking with the listener. I want to end
Mhm.
it in the same way. So,
Mhm.
Maggie, if you could talk directly with the listener,
Mhm.
what parting advice would you like them to leave them with?
Mhm. Never stop learning. I think that's a really important part. Never stop learning and don't be afraid of making mistakes. Because I think in Europe specifically, very different from America, but in Europe
Mhm.
specifically, over many, many years, we have had a culture of making mistakes is not a good thing. But it's the opposite. You make mistakes in order to grow.
Mhm.
So keep making mistakes and keep growing.
Definitely. I love that advice. Thank you, Maggie, for being on the Smarter podcast. I
Thank
cannot
you.
wait with everything that you've got going on in the future, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Thank you for having me.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Really quick, if you didn't catch the two books that Maggie recommended, her personal favorite reads that changed her life are Worthy, How to Believe You Are Enough and Transform Your Life, and Mission Control Management, both linked down below. I wanted to share a quote during the episode that really stuck out to me and I think is just absolutely mind blowing. While we were talking about it doesn't matter about the importance of whether you're an employee or a founder, creating an environment that molds with your brand values is vital. Meggy said the first 100 to 150 people that you hire can either make or break the culture of your company. Now, I just think that's absolutely amazing since the first couple of people that you employ are just vital to who your company is and how it will come across to other clients and be known in the world. And just remember how adaptability is one of the most crucial habits that you need to develop to thrive in a work environment, especially in such a fast changing, fast paced, always evolving company like Tesla. It can help you analyze where you're currently at in goals to see where you can improve, which can link to how many frequent weekly calls you have with your team. And it can help you reflect on your progress as yourself if you're not yet an employee, or if you are an employee, on the team's goals, on your personal assignments and projects. And if nobody tells you this today, I want to be the first that tells you that I believe in you and your ability to create the life of your dreams.